So if we're looking for textures, you can of course type in textures in the search box. You can also find textures under 2D and then textures and materials. And there are a lot of types of textures and materials categorized under here. But one in particular that I want to point you to that functions a little differently than the rest are skies. So if you check sky, and then also let's just to cut things down, let's do free. We're gonna look at free skyboxes. And skyboxes are cool because, well, they change the whole sky, but also the lighting, the kind of ambient lighting that's in your scene. So I'm gonna pick one and show you how we deal with a skybox because it functions rather differently than regular textures. Okay, so I found my Farland skies, and then it has a skyboxes folder, and then each separate skybox is inside its own folder. But I want to show you how you deal with this because it's handled a little differently than other textures. Up here on the right, so far we've only dealt with the inspector tab. Every time we've clicked an object, we've had plenty to think about here. But you may have noticed that there's another tab up here on the right called lighting. And under lighting, this is where we deal with the environmental lighting, the kind of ambient light of the whole scene. And by default, it's getting its ambient light from a skybox that has a sun. And so here is that skybox material. So if you were trying to change what your sky looks like, this is where you would do it, under lighting. And you should be able to click and drag these in, or when you see one of these little circles next to a choice in Unity, if you click it, it'll bring up all of the possible assets that you have in your project that could be applied here. So this is looking for a material. So this is showing me every material in our project. And we're going to try one of these. Maybe I'll go with the midday for now. So the idea here I was thinking was that I have such a cartoony world because of these trees that maybe this very cartoony skybox will give us the look I'm after. Now while we're here in lighting, we should take note that our lighting does come from some directional source, and you can see it in the cast shadows. So here it's talking about what is the sun source, and if you click this choice, it'll kind of reveal itself. It's this directional light that's been our default since the start of our project. Next, we have our environmental lighting settings, and all of these things are talking about where is it getting the kind of ambient light. Like you'll notice in this shadow that the shadow is quite blue, like the skybox is. Even though the color of the sun is not a blue color temperature. So this is like the ambient light, right? And you can turn up its intensity, meaning, you know, how much of the skybox is going to bounce around in this scene. You can turn that up or down. You could also, if you wanted to have this skybox but not have its color affect the lighting, you can change this to a gradient or just a blank color. You know, if our color is red for some reason, you know, even though the sky looks blue, everything's getting this kind of ambient red tint or pink or magenta tint, whatever I choose. So there's options there, but I'm going to stick with Skybox. And for now, I'm going to leave the rest of this staying put. But I do want to point out that we can make adjustments to this sun, this directional light object. So if we click on that and go back to the inspector, now we have options for our sun. The size of it doesn't really matter, but the location does. So if we're going to change the direction of our shadows, you know, if you wanted to get the sense that the sun was coming from a different angle, you don't like where the shadows are hitting or whatever, then you can rotate the directional light. You can also create a sense of short or long shadows depending on, you know, how high in the sky the sun is. Finally, down under light, you can change the type of light, whether it's really spotted light or directional. Directional is a lot more appropriate for a sun, and you can have more than one light. So, you know, if you want a spotlight in addition, you could add it here under light, spotlight, and then this thing is its own whole separate issue. But back to our sun. We can also change the color of this. So right now the sun is sort of a warm orange, but if for some reason we want to push it maybe a little bit more cartoony or something, I can make that color a little hotter. You can change the intensity and change things about the shadow type to get different aesthetic here. Some of this stuff you can just play with and see what you like. You do have to be aware, though, that at some point there is a render cost to having too many objects, too many lights, too complicated a scene or too complicated of settings. And so just like game developers, you have to think about efficiency and like what kind of computer could this run on. In general, for our first go out, I don't want you to worry too much about that kind of stuff. But if you find yourself in a situation where your computer is not capable of running a setting that you tried to turn on, you know, edit, undo, back it up, and make sure your project can actually be played by the computer that you're testing it on. So let's mess with that spotlight a little bit now that we got the sun where we want it. By default, it kind of ended up way out here, not affecting anything. And that's sort of easy for things to do sometimes when you're working in 3D. You might, from this angle, think, oh yeah, it's like hovering here, and it's right on my on the edge of my rug. Why am I not seeing the light? And then when I moved my cursor over, I actually found out, oh, it's not there at all. You know, it's way out here. So sometimes the 3D projection can fool you. So it can be good to just click on an object and make sure its position starts at 0, 0, 0 to give you like something to work with. And you're like, okay, all right, now I know it's back in the middle and I can raise it and lower it. And move it around from here. So check it out. The spotlight is something that can be moved. It can be rotated, and it can also, if we grab these points on the circle here, we can change how spotted it is, and then we're able to turn up and that's also a slider here, spot angle, if you prefer to do it in the inspector. And we can also just click and drag in the intensity and turn it up a little bit until we start to see it. You can see if you blow it out too hot, it looks unrealistic, but you could potentially, get some interesting effects here with a little bit of lighting design. Either to make somebody's eye look to a certain object, or make us want to walk to a certain place, or if we need to cast a second shadow, from something, or highlight something, then this can be a useful tool.